Thank you very much for staying with us. We begin our broadcast by telling you about how hours after a mother duo were electrocuted in Bengaluru, two electricity body engineers have been suspended. Now, the mother-daughter duo were electrocuted after they came into contact with a live wire which was hanging from the top. In fact, disturbing visuals from the incident site show the 23-year-old young mother and her daughter lying dead on the road after coming in contact with the naked wire. A case has been registered and cops are investigating the matter, where Bescom officials are being interrogated. All right, to understand this development further, I believe I have my guests joining me on the broadcast. Let me take this opportunity to introduce them. Sandeep Anirudhan, founder, Citizens Agenda for Bengaluru, and Priya Chetty Rajagopalan, founder, Heritage Beku. I appreciate the both of you taking time out and joining us here on Mirror Now to share with us your perspective. But obviously, this is a very unfortunate incident. In fact, puts focus once again on civic apathy. Priya, let me begin with you. This is, of course, not the first time, which is why this is a cause of concern.
Thank you. I mean, this is a terrible thing to happen post-Diwali, post-festivities. But this is, as you pointed out earlier, not the first time something like this has happened. And one must remember that if it's Bescom is a public limited company. It's a profit-making entity, and they have therefore even double the responsibility towards citizens to make sure that they deliver on the promise of delivering safe and accessible electricity. The point that there were optic cables and they just walked on it and died so tragically is a testimony to the fact that we are used to so much of inefficiency. The fact that we have supposedly a smart city with cables running underground, that these cables are still lying over and people can mistake them for electrical wires. In my building, about a year ago, our building manager's son, who was actually just playing ball on his terrace, touched a live wire and died immediately. He was 15 years old. Now, we take these incidents, I think, in our stride, like as if, this is just bad luck and this is terrible, such a tragedy. But the thing that we forget, which is equally tragic, is these are all preventable. These are all preventable. And every single time when it happens because of negligence or because somebody has not come in because it's after hours or whatever, I think it shows so badly on a department where it is literally a matter of life or death. So while we're talking about human beings, I can also tell you the number of times I've brought up in my own ward, I'm on the ward committee, to be able to say, hey, there are even the street lights or the street lamps, there's a problem with earthing. So, small children or dogs at that level are, touching a live wire. And it's happened so many times. Those things haven't been fatal. They have been very, very dangerous. And I've seen my own dog sort of jump back in complete and utter shock and has been sick for days. This brings me to another point, because there's a larger issue at stake here. There's nothing as critical as a life, and a life of a young woman and a 9-month-old child that has been lost, in these terrible, terrible circumstances, and most importantly, avoidable circumstances. The question of governance, while we'll be quick to lay blame on a Bescom, which, as I said once again, it's a corporation, so therefore they have a profit and loss sheet. They are accountable in more ways than one. Where is the level of accountability across the basic level of governance, which is not just the state or the city or the zone, but the ward? If you look at something like Whitefield, which has got Whitefield Rising and such an amazing group of citizens who are hands-on, simply because I don't think they have probably a very hands-on MP or a very hands-on MLA to kind of give the support that they need. And they definitely don't have corporators who would take interest in these kind of things because it is their own area. I would draw attention to the fact that this is more than enough time for the ward committees to be revived. Right now, we do not have them functioning because we've had no corporators and no corporate elections for the last 3 years. Various governments have just let them. This is one of the fallouts because local governance is not happening. Local citizens can take responsibility and ownership and push back against these kind of glaring civic omissions and make something happen. So I know we're going from step one, which is a tragic death, to something else, which is a governance issue. And I don't think that these are the only two, areas to be covered. There's so many other things to be discussed. I'm sure Sandeep will jump in on things like, efficiency, effectiveness. Right. What is the preventive maintenance being done? How is it being handled post post-monsoon, which is always a time when something like this happens. And how is it that we coordinate with other agencies? The optical fiber is a joke. In Bangalore, you'll find them lying. The wires are lying everywhere. We are so dependent on internet that we don't get involved, or we don't push as hard as we should. But these optical fiber cables have got the option of going underground. The only thing is it costs money. And I think that these people should take some responsibility, because not only do these kinds of incidents happen, but also, the fact that they're lying and low-lying cables are floating around, they have caused people to fall down, get, caught on the neck, and all sorts of things. So this must be handled. And overall, the system of governance has to go back to the people, and the ward committees, which take care of individual areas, must be revived. It's been 4 months since we've had a ward committee meeting in our area, for example, and I think it's really really terrible thing to happen. But in this particular incident, my condolences to the family.
Absolutely,
And
Priya.
the
In
fact
fact,
that we
I'd
still
have to interject you there. I'm going to come back to you, but you've made some very valid and significant points, right? You've touched upon the fact that there is no accountability. It's also left to the citizens to come out there, take up the issue themselves, which is sad, because you have elected representatives to be doing their job, but that's clearly not happening. But let me get in Sandeep here. Sandeep, of course, Priya's made valid points, the way she looks at it as well. But as far as we speak about this incident, she also touched upon a very interesting point with the fact that when monsoon is in Bengaluru, we see how many civic incidents like this transpire. Why can't we be better prepared?
Nivedana, yes, I agree. Priya's actually covered the whole gamut of the lack of a governance framework which the city suffers from. I think Bengaluru doesn't deserve to be called the IT capital or a Silicon Valley, simply because the conditions are slum-like throughout the city. If you walk on a footpath, typically, it's not, you find cables dangling, optic fiber cables dangling, you have cable TV cables dangling. And what happens because of this is, in this instance, it was an electric live cable. But people might not notice the difference because there are so many cables dangling all over the place. So somebody unfortunately became victim to a live electric cable. The only way to get rid of this is get rid of all cables that are piggybacking on electric poles illegally. Unfortunately, the city launches drives once in a while, but the very next day, all these operators come back and lay their cables. I think it's high time the city booked police cases against every violator who allow, put their cables up on all these poles, and penalizes them, applies the law against them. Otherwise, the culture is not going away. So essentially what's happening is, in Bengaluru, you have a culture of lawlessness. You can pretty much break the laws on everything. You can build buildings illegally. You can violate pretty much every other law. You can drill borewells without licenses or permissions. So there's a collective lack of law enforcement. This is where the city needs to start. Apply the law. Whatever laws exist, they must be enforced. Otherwise, there is a general, descent into lawlessness, and these are the outcomes. What we need to remember, Nivedana, is Bengaluru has the highest number of pedestrian deaths in the country. We have the stigma. It's not safe for a pedestrian to walk on a footpath. Literally every footpath is full of holes. A lot of footpaths don't exist. They're basically drains which are covered with slabs. Those slabs will have holes in them. People can slip through those holes and fall into the drain. It's that dangerous to walk on a footpath. Just 3 days back, a resident in Whitefield, a stone's throw away from where this incident took place, tripped and fell down. And she took a video immediately around her of the conditions of the footpaths. They were full of holes, breaks. It was like a very uneven place, and there were cables sticking out everywhere, from the ground, from the air. This is the state of a typical footpath in Bengaluru. What do you expect? It is a disaster zone. These are tragedies waiting to happen. So there's a collective lack of civic governance. The government needs to get its act together, and as Priya rightly pointed out, the way to go is to implement the 74th Amendment, decentralize, have a city government which unifies all the services, and have ward committees, area sabhas, and decentralize them to the citizens level, so that citizens can offer oversight and ensure these things are all set right. When it is centralized, there's apparently no will. There's a state government which actually dictates what should happen in the city. These are all MLAs from across the state. They do not care about the city. Therefore, there is no improvement in the city's planning or governance. This, as Priya rightly pointed out, this is the crux of the problem. There's lack of decentralization. But in an overall sense, there's talk of brand Bengaluru by the Bangalore minister. But that brand can only be developed if we have standards and if we have law enforcement. With these two things missing, Bengaluru unfortunately has a very bad brand. A brand is not a logo or an advertisement campaign. A brand is the lived experience of people who interact with that product or service, in this case, the city. And the lived experience of an average Bengalorean is very low in terms of delivery of services, quality of life. There's pollution, there's garbage, there's complete mayhem when it comes to construction activities. Literally, almost every building constructed is illegal nowadays, and they're not being demolished as per law, even though the High Court has been passing orders asking for them to be demolished. And then generally, there's absolute lack of planning. The city does not have a master plan. Imagine the Silicon capital of India does not have a master plan, and it wants to be Singapore. But we totally overlook the fact that Singapore has a master plan for 50 years. We don't even have a master plan for a year.
Sandeep, essentially the foundation is weak, right? So how do you make a building on that when the foundation, the basics we've not got right? But Priya, both of you, of course, have really deep dived into how this has panned out. Yes, Priya, I'm coming to you. But I also want to ask you this, Priya. What is unfortunate is the more incidents we see like this, there is no value for life.
I think we've been seeing this for a while now. Whether you look at the pothole accidents or whether you look at issues around garbage or bites, you name it. I mean, I think the value for life is definitely not what it should be. I want to also remember the glass is half full, because Bangalore has got a lot of good things going for it, which places it where it is, in the center of India in terms of a commercial economic capital. There's a lot of great things going for Bangalore. But this part of it, it's a city that is overwhelmed by itself, by its growth, and underwhelmed by the number and I would say the granularity of bureaucratic staff and governance that it needs. You need more, and you need people who are accountable in terms of results. When you talk to people one-on-one, you realize that they have got so much to do and they really can't go into detail. Why is it happening? Is because there's not enough conversation between the parastaples. They're supposed to have this monthly meeting where all the different agencies like Bescom and BWSSB and Smart City and BBMP get together, and police. But I think that happens more in the breach than anything else. I want to make 2 points, which came to mind while you were talking about the city. The fact is that while we keep talking about wanting to be global, etc., the ability to manage different strata of society and to realize that today more and more people are using forms of transport which are bicycling, walking. I mean, you should be able to choose the walking route or the public transport route wherever possible. We treat our pedestrians with such indignity, with such a laissez-faire kind of attitude. We just don't care about our pedestrians. It's almost like, okay, you have your 2 legs, you take your chances with them. Now, this is unacceptable. Wherever we talk about transportation, we completely undermine the fact that people need to go from place A to place B using their own 2 legs. This young lady with a 9-month-old daughter was using her 2 legs, not knowing that that was the most dangerous form of transport that day. And that really hurts, So please, let's also remember how little the administration, the government puts attention on the plight and the space required for pedestrians. Talk about places like Malleshwaram. Old people are happy to walk around. People would happy to walk short distances around. But if you don't have a straight footpath and you have it encroached by all sorts of things, including cars or scooters or people, it is not going to be possible, and you're going to put more burden on your city. So I won't belabor that point, but this is an important point and it has long-term impact. The second thing is, and Sandeep also touched upon this, it's really important. When we talk about lack of accountability of electoral representatives, I never thought the day would come when I would be missing my corporator, right? Because you are looking at a level of governance which is at your ward level, where a group of people, citizens, work with the government, work with the corporator who's an elected representative at a small, maybe a lakh people in my ward, for example. But for 3 years, to have a government officer who is your nodal officer in lieu of a corporator means nothing gets done. And the sense of empowerment we had, whether it was installing CCTV cameras, making sure that our voice was heard in terms of some of the roads that had to be reworked, some of those electricity issues, for example, we had a lot of problems there between Bescom and BWS. We were able to, as citizens, step up, intervene, create those bridges between the contractor and the government with the citizen to make sure those results, those outcomes that we wanted happened. Today, we're not able to do so. So the elected representatives are not the MLAs and the MPs who are insisting on taking over, control over what should be minor civic issues handleable at the ward level and making themselves more important than they really are. This is a requirement of a corporator and a good set of ward committee and bureaucracy at the ward level. And you leave Bangalore to that, you will see a lot of improvement. And it already had started happening because the wards were very, very active at one point. Today, 2 governments have changed, and we still don't have the corporator elections moving forward, and therefore we don't have the ward committees, which they are part of in place. We don't even know how many wards we have. This is the level of confusion in Bangalore. And again, this is all at a macro level. The real issue always comes down to the fact that the reality and what's on ground is a young woman and a child who don't have a future because they put one wrong foot forward. And was it their fault? Was it somebody else's? Who takes accountability? Are we quick to blame? How do we change the system? How do we make sure, rather than blame and point fingers, how do we prevent? How do we prevent? I'll give you a small example of how this
That is
works.
the ultimate question. Absolutely, Priya. I'd have to interject you there because I'm afraid we're running out of time. But quickly, before we wrap, Sandeep, just the closing comments. We've understood that the 2 engineers have been suspended. But is that enough?
In this particular instance, I'm not too sure about where the blame lies, because an electric cable it fell down. I'm assuming that a network, when it comes undone, there must be safety equipment which trips automatically. Perhaps as a technical error, I think it's next to impossible to actually have somebody go and clean every cable every day. I don't know if that works. But the larger case to be made here is pedestrians have to be clear. In fact, an electricity cable should not be running overhead above a pedestrian space either, which is a risk. So this boils down to planning. And if there's no proper planning, no proper formation of footpaths, no maintenance of footpaths, when a footpath has too many things challenging you, different levels, holes, this, you might miss out something else which is hanging from above because there's no clear view. So there are too many things confusing a person who's walking, which is why we have the highest pedestrian deaths in India happening in Bengaluru. And furthermore, the Indian Road Congress norms of 2022, I think it's IRC 103-2022, fixes mode priority as pedestrians. Pedestrians come first in the mode priority, which is footpaths and stuff like that. Now, which means when a road is being formed, the first priority is that a proper walkable footpath has to be made. Only in the remaining space should you offer space for vehicles. This is clearly mandated in the latest IRC rules, and every civic body has to go by these norms, which is my understanding. I don't know if they do. So the world is changing in its thought, outlook, and stuff like that. But our bureaucracy and governments are still stuck in old ways. They need to rise to the occasion and change.
Sandeep, on that note, I'll have to interject you there because I'm afraid we're short of time. But I appreciate you as well as Priya for joining us here on the broadcast, asking those pertaining questions, which of course citizens continue to ask. Only time is going to tell if that's going to change. But for the moment, we leave the conversation at that. Thank you very much for taking your time out once again. We're shifting our focus now.